one tomorrow.
Oh yeah. Good night, sweet. Good evening, welcome back to Fat Man Paints. Bit late today, I've just been watching Taskmaster and quite enjoying that one. So, all fun and games. Not quite sure how long I'm going to be streaming for tonight. I've got a 4 o'clock session in the morning to do a bit of work, so that's either stay up until 4 o'clock and push through, or be a little more sensible and get a bit of kit beforehand. So we'll figure out what I'm going to do. Not quite sure yet. Actually, no, we're going to get some kit. I'm going to be bloody hopeless otherwise. So today we're just going to do a bit more work on the Mawloc we've got. So yesterday we put a first coat of a seraphim shade all over the flesh bits, the skin bits of the Mawloc, and now I'm going to do a whole bunch of dry brushing on this one to bring up some detail and smooth out that kind of rather bitty, rough looking shade that we put in there. As you may know, dry brushing is my my favourite technique. And what we're going to do, we're going to run through a whole series of colour, a bit of an outline, and slowly just build up more lightness and really even out the wash that we've got on here, build up the layers on the highlighted area, and as you can see each step is slightly lighter than the previous one. Just bring it up to a top, and so increasingly lighter shades of the wash as we go through. And by the end of it, after these multiple run throughs, hopefully the whole look of this, the whole skin kind of stuff should be pretty fine, and it'll, like I said, even it out, and it'll look quite good. So what are we going to use? We're going to start off with some Kislev flesh. I've only got a pot of air. That's what I've got, never mind, but we're only doing a bit of dry brushing, so it's more about getting pigment on the brush. We'll then go for some Eldar flesh, follow that with some Tyrant skull, a layer of wraith bone. What I then do is a little bit of Flesh Terror's red contrast, and I kind of put that in all the little splits and all the little tears that are around on some of the arm joints and that. So I think if you can see just here, there's these little kind of ribbed little bits that sit on some of the limbs and sometimes sit in some of the joints. So I kind of put that in there, and I finalise with a pallid witch flesh dry brush as well. So as I said, you can see slight colour variations between each one. Slightly lighter, slightly whiter, slightly less kind of tan and brown. And overall it just will go through, it just evens out the model and takes some of the harshness and some of the extreme contrast away from the shade that we put in on there. So we're going to get started with the Kevlar flesh. Just put the other ones off to the side for the moment. I'm going to be using a Games Workshop small dry brush. We're doing a lot of dry brushing. This thing will be toast probably by the end of this model. There's a lot of things that it's going to catch up, but we'll see how we do. And we're going to have some cheap cooking lager to accompany the session, because it is, after all, a little bit past 10 o'clock. It's late, it's a Thursday night. Got a bit of punk rock going through my mind, my virtual playlist. I don't want any copyright strikes. That's great. I have cleared some space in one of the spare rooms where I'm going to try and set up my photo booth over the weekend. So I'm going to start taking some photos of progress, photos of the 35% of finished models that I've got, and start kind of putting those up somewhere so that we can actually get to see a bit of progress, see what I've done, see where we end up from this kind of model to the finished example. Right, glasses off. With the paint, and basically away we go. As usual with dry brushing, I like to load up the brush with pigment and instantly take a lot of this stuff off. And because it's air, it's already quite thin. Let's just start taking it across the model, and then it'll be a slow build-up of layers as we go through. It'll be difficult to tell sort of individually as we go, but the end result is very much kind of obvious when I've done it on other models how it looks. So it's a slow process. It'll take time, but I mean, in my view, seeing what I've done on the other models, it works. Well, it works for me. It gets my my model done. I'm happy with the result. I think, as I've said before, I'm about having something that looks good on the table, looks good with its compatriots on a shelf. Let's see if we can get a better view with the camera on here. Get more in the middle. Something that looks good on the shelf, something that looks good as a full army. Not something that's going to win me many prizes at a Golden Demon or similar. Something where we will be really happy with what we've done. So my painting process is pretty straightforward for Tyranid. Start with a base white prime. I use a Tamiya fine surface primer as the basis for it. I then do the carapace, all that kind of chitted armour. I then do the flesh, which is what we're working through now. Then I start doing some of the detail stuff, so I'll do the mouth, the claws, eyes, any skull bits that we might have skull brain bits that we've got sitting around, depending on the model itself. Then work my way through the base. I always leave the base to last because you're painting around the various bits of the model itself. There's always a chance that you're going to excuse me. There's always a chance that you're going to overpaint it, so I always do the base last. Just work on the rest of the model all the way there. Alright. This will bore me, it'll bore you guys as well, so bear with me as we go through. And I will try and think about something more interesting to say. Probably, in terms of this model, we're a little over halfway through of the painting with what we've done so far. The dry brushing with this fella is probably going to be a bit tricky, because not tricky but time consuming, because it's quite a bit of it. It's a big old model. To make sure that we touch all the parts at least once with the dry brush, it will it'll take a bit of time to make sure that we go through with a finished paint already with the air. It's going to take a little longer to do it, but we'll keep going through with this one, and then we'll just rinse and repeat with the increasingly lighter colours as we go through. Like I said, it just, for me, it's a lazy way of blending, is dry brushing. I don't need a wet palette, I don't need particularly any great level of skill. What we're really relying on is the process, rather than any great artistic endeavour, certainly on my part. We're relying on the technique, relying on the process to get the model hopefully looking good. I think I also admit my favourite bit of all of this is actually the basing. Finishing off the basing when we get there. I think that's the bit that really just kind of frames the model. But we are a little bit away from getting that done on this one. We've got all these paints to go through before we get there. Anyway, let's just keep pushing on. I won't get finished by talking about it, which is a damn shame. That was a way to do work. And again, with the advent of the massive push and improvements in AI we've seen over the past 12 months, who knows? Tell a computer what you want it to do, let that generative AI go off and figure it out, to send your emails, to fill out forms. Get it to design your STL files for your D&D characters. I suspect there's an awful lot of possibility. You start putting all that generative AI together, give it a description of what you want your STL file to be, a 28mm mini of a wizard in a long robe wielding a two-handed sword with a little pseudo dragon sitting on his shoulder. I'm sure if you put it into one of the image generating ones, it would generate it. A little bit of work, I'm sure those programs could start generating those 3D images of it, and God knows where we'd end up with stuff. Quite exciting, quite scary at the same time. Anyway, until then, watch me bloody paint this thing for another couple of years at this rate. Actually, realistic, with any luck, this will be more like another 6 or 7 hours in total, including all the basing, all the detail work. We'll see what we get through. So is it maybe a little tricky to see exactly slight improvements from our pretty rubbish webcam. I'll slowly start to see an evening out of these colours, and I think as we go through the palette and increasing the lightness of this, it'll really start to work through. Did actually have another colour in the cycle, but I've decided that I don't need it anymore. It's just too similar to one of the other ones, so I've taken it out of the set that I go through. It just wasn't needed. Let's go. These bits of mandible and whatever these bits are, tentacles. That odd noise you might be hearing in the background is the dog getting ready to go for a walk. Gets rather excited, that little fella. As you can hear. Right, dog is now out for his nightly constitutional, so he's happy. Already fed up. No. Well, I've covered most of the areas with this layer. It's quite close to the colour that we had already, so this is just really kind of almost just like a first layer of, even though it's dry brushing, it's kind of just blending a bit of that harshness of the wash together. Already started to catch some of the edges and highlights. Go under the arms here. Brush a bit of a clean and move on to the next lighter one. And maybe next time I'll be a bit more methodical about where I'm going to take the brush, the areas we're going to cover. hard to tell, but that has made an initial start on there. So that was Kislev flesh. Now I'm going to move on to some elder flesh, which is just a step lighter. But it will, again, just help build up on what we're going through on this one. This being Games Workshop dry paint. It's like painting with cottage cheese. It's as thick as anything. I think that's the whole point of it though. It's mostly more pigment than medium. As you can see, possibly one of the few paints of Games Workshop where it wouldn't really matter if you accidentally knock it over. You might have a couple of months. Oh, you bastard! Have you dried? It might have actually dried out completely. Ah. I think this might be very much the last time. This as usual. I think it's gone. Some wet pigment at the bottom there, but I think for the most part it might be you. Let's see, we're still. Still get some pigment on there. Might just do its job. Right, so let's start a bit more methodical here. So I'm going to start around the head, the neck. Yeah, there's just enough pigment there to do its job. It's not as bad as it seems. But I will. I will be throwing this away and getting a replacement when we're done, so I won't be using too much of this one today. We'll move on to the next cream cheese one, which will be the Tyranid skull dry paint, which I suspect won't be too much different, too much better. But yeah, this one's nearly done, but it's doing its job. You can definitely see it catching the edges now. Starting to even this out, starting to see a lot of just shadows there, cut in bits. Certainly getting right. Let's get rid of this blob of congealed shit. There's nothing there to work on. It's all done. Let's throw that away. Just enough, I think, to keep going on this. torso bits. The neck, just run a bit more over there. There is just a little bit left at the bottom of that pot. It's not totally compromised. Just enough. To do what I needed to do here. Just enough. I might have to have a trip to a Games Workshop, or I could order from someone like Wayland Games in a couple of days, along with something else to bring it up to the postage threshold, free postage threshold. I could get a Lictor, maybe 10th edition Lictor. Could get a Piebald. Let's wait and see. Or I could just save money and just buy a single pot in the local store. What I'm just trying to do now is, because it is such a poor pot of paint, I'm just trying to catch more of the tops of the model. Pulling out bloody bogey. Not ideal. There we go. Luckily I'm not reliant on just this one paint to complete this cycle at this stage. Otherwise it puts on a bit of a hold while I sort it out. despite that, it's still doing its job. I can see the softening coming through. I can see the effective blending coming through. Because that's an absolute piece of shit, I'm done with that. And we'll move on to the next one, which is Tyrant Skull, which is, yeah, not much better. I might have a spare one of those. Do I have one? Looking on my shelf behind me. I don't think I did. Let's put them on the order form, I think, and we'll find out what we get. Right, anyway, let's give the brush a clean and get rid of all of that mouth that we build up on there. Alright, I'm actually going to give it a proper clean with some brush soap. Let's just get the pigment out of this. And then we'll move on to the next paint. What am I doing? It's 20 to 11. I'm going to do a little bit of work in 5.5 hours. Actually, that's not quite true. I don't have to do work. I have to sort of watch people do other work. Just kind of be there as a representative. So it's even worse. Right, that will do for the time being. Back in. Tyrant Skull. Right. Just one moment.
Yeah.
Need to get a new one, Joe. I need to get a new one. Paint's a bit stuffed.
Yeah.
This one's not much better, but never mind.
Does look good though.
We're getting there, son. We're getting there. Oh, there we go. It's more of a gel. I can get paint. I can get pigment on the brush.
You can pigment on the brush. Yeah.
As it should be. And again, I don't know. You might just be able to tell on my paper towel that I'm doing off. It's just again a slightly lighter, slightly more white, less beige brown kind of colour. And again, it'll just help with all the details. And once again, we'll go through the same areas. We'll do the head. Take it to just catch the joins, the areas, the highlights. Just keep dragging it through. Get a bit of pigment on there. Oh, it's bright dry brushing. Just help bring out all the detail, because the Tyranid sculpts are generally pretty good. I have to admit that they're quite interesting, exciting things. So much influence from kind of the xenomorph from the Alien franchise, and the bugs from Starship Troopers. And you know the lineage for all of these. You know exactly where the designers were coming from when they started designing these on the, I guess, originally carving them. But some of those really early metal Tyranids are so goofy. I know people have a real soft spot for them, but I don't. I think they were never part of my youth, and they just look so dopey. I have no interest in owning them, painting them, fielding them. Though people do, and that's super good. About people, this is a hobby. It's about doing what you want. It's not about pleasing other people. At the same point, don't be a dick. Let's be a good person. Respect your fellow gamer. Encourage your fellow modeller. If you think we can do something better, let them know. If you think we've done something awesome, let them know. Offer advice and encouragement. People say that they think they've done something really good on a model, let them know. It makes people feel good. I mean, don't make up crap, but it's one of those things where if you don't have something nice to say, generally don't say anything. But if you do have something good to say, people love to hear great things about their models. And I know unless you are doing that kind of golden demon stuff, otherwise I always feel that for me, I'm definitely building and painting and doing modelling for me. There was a period when I was on a few forums, and you ended up modelling for the forum, as in trying to do something that the forum was expecting, above and beyond levels of detail, speed, stuff like that, and it ended up being more of almost a chore, more of a job than a hobby. So I'm quite glad when I stopped kind of joining in that rat race of modelling. So I've really now focusing on just doing it for me, really. But I'm also glad that my listeners, or one of you, is more than happy to spend time with me as I go through these fellas. Subtly different from that kind of forum thing. I'm still painting what I want to do, even if it is with people potentially watching. I hope, if nothing else, pick up some hints and tips and you get inspired to go off and clear off your own army of grey. Pick up a paintbrush and through your own backlog and create some awesome stuff. And go and have a game. Go and show your mates. Take it to your local Games Workshop for a session. Take it to your local gaming community. You know, whatever works. Hey, hello everybody. I've been raided again. That happened last night. I didn't know what a raid was last night. That was all a bit of new for me last night. So wow, welcome everybody. You're watching Paint Dry with me, Fatman Paint, as I try and clear my Tyranid army backlog. I have a lot of models to go, and I take way too long. That's probably because I drink way too much beer. But hey, it's, I don't know, 11 o'clock at night, near enough. What else am I going to do? Anyway, enjoy if you can. Spend a bit of time with me. Shoot some shit in the channel. Laugh at me. Laugh with me. It's all good. It's a Thursday night. Practically the weekend. And apart from the fact that I've got to do some work at 4 AM in the morning, everything is kind of good. I don't know where you guys have come from on your raid, but welcome nonetheless. Right, slowly starting to tone down the wash that I did on the last bit of this one, and ourselves ready for the next layer, which is yet another layer of dry brush. Before it's sweaty palm time, when I've got to do some very fine painting with this in some very small little areas of the model. It's the bit I hate about all of the painting of these things, because I'm not a great painter. My hand is not always so steady. Right, really close to having this particular layer done and dusted. He's not a Trigon, no, this fella is a Mawloc. I did a Trigon a couple of months back, so this one's a Mawloc, and he's a lot more pointy and spiky. These things we've got here are just getting the bloody way of the paintbrush, and they're really fucking annoying. But he is another burrower, another one of these ones you can deep strike on your game. quite a big model. It's quite a tall fellow when you're comparing to some of the other ones. It's quite impressive on the. Nom nom nom. Absolutely consume. It's all biomass at the end of the day. Consume, eat. Away we go. Right, I think I'm nearly done with this particular layer. Just make sure we're brushed in. There we go. Let's give the paintbrush another clean. Let's get really mucky. And next up is where we're going. It's maybe some Wraithbone that we're going to dry brush over. And again, we'll just keep lightening up the layer as we keep trundling through. But it's from where we started earlier in the evening. It's definitely softened that wash that I put on last night. It's definitely eased off some of the excessive contrast that we had in there. It's contrasting quite nice with the carapace on this chitin armour, if you can see. So got a nice contrast coming on between the dark red feathered bit of the back and then the bits of the body sticking up. So yeah, it's coming along quite nicely. So under Hive Hero, yeah, we're all good. It's cheap lager time. It's a Thursday night. I'm all good. I'm old, fat, tired, incredibly busy with work. It's very stressful. So coming and sitting here and doing this, it's really quite relaxing. I'm just thinking about the models, not thinking about work. Well, that needs a bit of brush soap. Just generally having fun. We had a ride from me winter minutes, bloody hell. Gin and tonic. Oh, I don't mind a G&T every Sunday just before dinner. I think I've got a nice bottle of Bombay Sapphire that we go through. My wife likes rhubarb flavoured gin, which I think is an absolute travesty. It's just no good. Sorry, going back a bit. Piccolo, no, there is not a 4 AM in the morning. Was it in Good Morning Vietnam where Robin Williams shouted, "You know what the O stands for? It stands for, oh my fucking god, it's early." That's the only way. Gin's fine. Now these days I find it impossible to drink tequila. I've had one too many bad experiences with tequila, I have to say. I went on a bit of a bender one time with the old boss of a company I worked for many years ago, and his idea of fun was tequila slammers, but with cheap champagne instead of lemonade. It was absolute fucking carnage. Oh, yeah. Gin is gin. Flavoured gin is not gin. Sounds like you had fun down in Oz. So, isn't it? It's suppose it's that spring now in Oz, is it? It's coming up to that. Oh god, I bloody hate Games Workshop lids. Anyway, I kind of hate Games Workshop paints, but sometimes it's like painting with cream cheese. Let's pull that off to the side for a moment. Oh god, Sambuco. No! Oh, Jack. £40 a bottle for a bottle of gin. Oh. $5.99 down at Tesco's. I'm not I like the odd gin, but I'm not any kind of connoisseur of it. It's well, it's going to cause a mess, isn't it? I have to admit, I'm a cheap cooking lager. Favourite is my normal tipple because it's cheap and it can be really, really cold. And it can be just really nice, refreshing. You don't have too many. Right. Let's go with this slightly lighter layer now. With a look, a bit of patience, I might get the skin layer done by the end of tonight, and then I can move on to all the nice detailed things: the teeth, the claws, the tongue, the mouth, and the base, which is possibly one of the things I enjoy more than anything else. My wife's parents make a damson flavoured gin, so they'll buy, you know, cheap litres of gin, and then they'll get fresh damsons from some friends. They'll put them all in a nice big demijohn, and they'll leave them for 10 years. A little bit of sugar, and then they it's really quite nice. It can be quite sweet, but it's a really nice little kind of liqueur after dinner. Really quite a pleasant drink. So what was that? How many bugs do I own in total? I have a spreadsheet somewhere. I think I've got 250 thereabouts, give or take a few. So I think it's a little less than 240 something. six months. Yeah. I think I've got about 250 bugs in total, just under. That includes things like the Leviathan box, but there's also quite a fair bit of troops in there. So there's 80 termagants, there's 40 gene stealers, 20 gargoyles. You know, a fair old kind of horde coming through there. No, the 170 to go is everything I've got sitting around. So that's all of the bugs from when I first started collecting, and like I said, some of those gene stealers and things that aren't yet finished, and does include everything in the Leviathan box as well. So probably just out of shot here, I've got 10 gene stealers. The old 2000 sculpts, they're all primed and ready to go. Probably after this big fella, I'll be doing a bit of work on those little ones to clear the numbers down, if not the equivalent points value. But I'm also tempted to do either the Screamer Killer or the Neuro Tyrant. I think my lad, who's the guy who actually plays the game, I just enjoy the build and the paint. he quite fancies the Euro Tyrant coming through, so might end up doing two at once, two of the big fellas, which is might be a bit biting off a bit more than I can chew, but we'll see. Thanks, Underhive. Yeah, I'm pleased with how this guy's coming out at the moment. I think I did a really, for me, I think I've done one of the best kind of chitin results that I've ever done on one of these things. Practice makes let's say perfect. It makes it better. And then we're slowly starting to come along with these dry brushing layers on the kind of fleshy skin areas. It's getting there. Some of the older ones. I'm sure if you've got a deep wallet and patience on eBay, you can get whatever you want. Old gene stealer wise, obviously. Being careful about what I suggest there. There's gum trees everywhere you want for else. Craigslist, that's it. Yeah, my kind of background originally is scale models, so I like building things like sort of old aircraft and tanks and stuff from Airfix and Dragon models and Tamiya and stuff like that. That's kind of my real background in modelling and painting, and I still really quite enjoy that, but I have to say for a lot of the new Games Workshop stuff, as a model kit, they're really nice, and they're really great kits compared with some of the Airfix stuff that I've worked on over the years. You know, they're really well engineered, they go together really well. I think I still somewhere have a lot of kind of the original early 80s white metal kind of pewter lead Citadel miniatures. In fact, I know I do. I've got tons sitting on the shelf behind me. Because back in the day when I was a youngster, early 80s, I used to play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons with my friends, and I remember going into the Arndale Centre in Manchester, going to the Games Workshop store and buying fistfuls of little white metal miniatures, zombies, skeletons, goblins, heroes, because they were like 40p each. It's so expensive these days. I know. Well, I'm not sure if it's a good thing you work for Games Workshop, but it sounds like it was pretty awful. Oh, a year or so, 6 months. Yeah, it's not necessarily a company I would want to work for. I think back in the day when it first started out, sort of the early 80s, it was a very different company. It really was a kind of hobby company. It was all about the games, it was all about what they're doing, and then at some point, I'm not quite sure when it was, at some point, was it late 90s, early noughties? I think they changed because they kind of stopped selling other companies' gaming systems, and it became, you know, we are Games Workshop and we sell Games Workshop. And I think at that point things really changed. They obviously started leaning very much into their own models and their own rule sets. You know, good for them, but they also significantly moved away from what a lot of the base was wanted. You know, I remember going into Games Workshop and buying Dungeons and Dragons magazines, rule books, Paranoia, Traveller, all those great ones. Hey, thanks, Lone Samurai. Yeah, I'm really pleased how this fella's coming along. yeah, sometimes you have your doubts as you start painting, but yeah, I'm quite pleased. Maybe not so pleased that overall I think I ended up the time, and that carapace took me 7 hours in total for all of it, because this bloody fella has so much of it. There's one of the, I think, with the tail and everything wrapping around, there's just so much of it. Anyway, and 40p single blister packs in Games Workshop. They were the days when I was a lad, young and foolish, full of hope. Pretty much the only armies I worked on is Tyranids. I've started doing some salamanders as the Space Marine faction, because things like Leviathan, I get a whole bunch of Tyranids and Space Marines. So I think we've got about 4,000 points of Space Marines just accidentally that we've got from some of the starter sets. I think it was No Fear, Dark Imperium, Leviathan, and also I've got 30 of the original Tactical Marines, the very original first release when you got a box of 30, and 3 original Rhinos as well from the same period. So they're all sitting somewhere, and at some point I'm going to get around to it. But no, in terms of other factions, the only thing I've started painting is, I said, some salamanders, and I will probably get to do some of those at some point as a bit of a palette cleanser, because there's only so much chitin you can paint in a week or two. We also got quite a bunch of Tau sitting around, but I've never really been quite sure about what colour to paint those things. I'm really tempted with kind of a Russian, Ukrainian, Eastern European kind of army colour, sort of either kind of the blues and greys that you see in the kind of Ukrainian Air Force. But I have 170 plus Tyranids that I'm going to paint first. Yeah, I don't have a vast nid scheme. I have a slow and ponderous nid scheme, which sums up me totally. Slow, ponderous, and fat, and drunk, but yeah, I enjoy every minute of it. Yeah, I think a lot of people have a lot of points with Space Marines accidentally, but also it's just so many different kinds of Space Marines. I know why, because they're popular, but I still don't know if they're popular because there's so many different versions of them, or are they just genuinely popular. Space Marines were never really my choice when we came back into this just before COVID and lockdown. My lad went with Scouts to Games Workshop and had his free sample of plastic crag, and there we go. It was the addiction started there. But when we kind of were looking at factions, Space Marines never really came to the top of the four. He was either going to go through Nids. He quite fancied Thousand Suns, but no way was I going to be painting any of those fellas. They just look way too much tricky for my mediocre skills. But we settled on Tyranids, and to be honest, I'm quite happy. I think they're a fun army. I do enjoy building and painting, and we were doing these before Leviathan, so I don't feel we've gone flavour of the month for these fellas. We've been okay. Well, he's coming along. Yeah, I was talking about buying plastic models, sort of like scale models. I have 150 scale model kit, so it's like 150 tanks, planes, trucks, sitting on various shelves around the house. Yeah, I like the collecting bit, but with like 3 kids and work, trying to find the time to sit down and do all this stuff can be quite hard, which is in some ways why kind of building and painting the Games Workshop stuff. You know, you can build 10 Termagants in a sort of half an hour session, even with sort of all the proper sprue clean up and taking your time and getting good thing. And so at the end of that, you can have something finished, and then you can, you know, the painting sessions take a little bit of time, do it over a few nights, and you've got something nicely finished at the end of it that looks great. So it's kind of like small bite-sized approach to the hobby, but still, I think still at heart, even though I'm enjoying this, still a scale model, tanks and planes at heart. But these are great, they're wonderful kits to build. Oh, I'm quite pleased how this is coming up along now. We're getting there. Yeah, I've got most of the Tyranid models we've got are just really kind of sitting in grey, to be honest, rather than primed. What I tend to do is when I decide what I'm painting next, I go through a process of making sure the models are finished properly. So I'll make sure that there's any seam lines I'll tidy up, or drill the barrels, or just kind of bit of filling, whatever. Then I'll treat the bases. I'll stick the odd skull on, or the bit of rock or something, and it's only at that point I'll prime. But I prime in small batches, and then it kind of really goes from prime to paint to finish, and as I'm kind of finishing off, I'll be prepping the next batch. So I've always only got a couple of things in prime at any given time. So if my lad wants to play, the things that are in prime he's not allowed to touch, but everything else is. So he may field a bit of an army of grey. Half of it will be painted, half will be grey, but the bits that are primed are all set offside. But I can't imagine if priming everything and then kind of picking what to do. So I always kind of know what's next on the list for the most part. Yes, I know what you mean there. No, I've got so much to paint. I'm actually having a bit of a purge of my scale models, because like you, there's no way. I'm 54 in a week. You know, I'm going to last 30 years tops. Even if I do that, then I've got to be building 10 a week, 10 a year to clear that stuff through. And there's a lot of really big models there. I've got the Fine Molds 1/72 scale Millennium Falcon, which is an absolutely awesome kit. You know, there's 2 or 3 months of building there to go through as well. Hey Raiders, thanks for coming from Bunky Gamer. I think you guys were maybe on the other night as well, so welcome back. I'm still painting this fella. I'm still working on the skin, because that's what we were on last night. But we're getting there. We're making some nice progress. It's settling down. I genuinely can't tell through my shitty webcam if you can see the difference that's been coming through on the skin as we've been doing dry brushing, but I'm quite pleased how the fella's coming along now. I'm going to have to do some detail painting now, which I don't particularly want to do, because it's a chance to really fuck up some of the little details. But it's all part of the model. Right, I'm just going to do a little bit more of this dry brush and a good brush clean. Beard top up. There we go. You guys all know each other. I've been doing this about a week, so I apologise. I've got no idea what I'm really doing with Twitch. There's a whole bunch of stuff about raids and that I didn't know anything about until yesterday. and it kind of happened, and I had to go and read up what on earth the raid was. So I kind of apologise for being a bit naive with all this stuff. Figure out how we get to this sorted in the next week or so. But the reason I've decided to kind of try and stream all this is to give a bit of motivation to go through and kind of finish off what I've got. So, you know, if I'm painting, flick on the camera and just get on with it. Kind of a bit of, well, it's a bit of motivation for myself to go through. Right. I'm quite pleased how this has all come along now. So, time for another brush clean. Time for a water change. This is all looking very, very mucky. Time for a top up. I'm going to do a little bit of Flesh Tearers Red and all the little tears and vents around the arms, all these little bits here. I'll find a small brush and I'll get in there, I'll get that all popped in there. I will. I have to admit, I need to start watching what other guys are doing on here, because there's some absolutely awesome painters, modelers on Twitch, and it's sort of watching you guys sort of just seemingly effortlessly drag the brush across a bit of paint, a bit of model, and you've got these really neat lines, you've got these really seamless shade transitions between it. It's awesome. Aye, but yeah, it's the accountability thing is quite interesting, but the idea of having a bit of a chat and a bit of a nut is a good point as well. In some ways, you know, modelling can be quite an isolationist hobby. It's something that can be done quite because it's, you know, it's you and a model. It can be very solo. I mean, I've been in a model club before, and that was really good. Kind of sort of catching up every couple of weeks with friends, seeing what they're up to, seeing what they've built, and that. And I used to go to a few clubs, but of course, when COVID came along, you know, everything stopped from that. You know, there was no meeting. All the model shows that I used to go to, the scale model stuff, they all just kind of ceased. We kind of all drifted apart a little bit as, you know, it's just, we couldn't get together. There was a lot of elderly people within the club. You didn't really want to risk anything with those guys. We just kind of drifted apart a bit. Right. We'll park that dry brush for a minute. Brush that away. I'm going to clean my water pots. I'm going to get some fresh water. Chat amongst yourselves. Keep yourselves occupied. Pardon me. I'll be back in a minute or two. essentials. Move those out of the way. Let's decant. Let's tidy up my mess. Right, let's find a nice small paintbrush. What I'm going to try and do now, I don't know if you can see with this really rubbish camera, but the little bits of vents that we get in the arms of a lot of Tyranids. When I first painted one, I filled it in with a little bit of red, and now I've made a rod for my own back, and I have to do this for every one of these models that I go through. So my mistake, but now we're into it. But it does kind of break up. It does kind of break up the skinny bits, the flesh bits a bit. So it does add a little more interest into what we're doing. And for whatever reason, I've chosen. Well, for this one, this is Flesh Tearer's red contrast paint. It's a common refrain. I do have a vortex mixer that I use, but I think this stuff is okay what I need it for. It doesn't need to be too much so. I don't like this bit because my hands are not necessarily that steady. Getting a good purchase can be hard on a mod. Oh, what's happened to that? Bristles are kind of dead on that one. Try it again. It's a bit better. God, I've got quite a few Citadel paint pots, obviously. I know they're awful. I know I can do better. I mean, I have a lot of Vallejo as well. You know, I've got a whole mix of paints, whatever, kind of almost whatever I need. But sometimes it's easy to buy these things because there's a Games Workshop near where I work. There's a Games Workshop not too far away from where I live. So, you know, if I need a paint, I can actually go and buy one. I can get one that day or the next day. Online, where you can kind of get everything, sometimes it's just a little bit of a delay. It can just be a bit awkward to kind of do it, especially if you've got a project and you want something. So there's an element of convenience and availability for these things, but God, the pots are awful. Oh, they're just awful. But I don't think I'm telling anybody anything they don't already know in that one. Oh, no worries, Bunker. I'm just really kind of surprised that people want to watch me, if the truth be told, or have a chat with me. I feel quite flattered by people joining and sitting on here and spending a little bit of time with me as well. So no problem. I will try and get to watch your stream at some point. I know work and life have been a bit busy recently, and I do have 170 Tyranids to paint, but I will be trying to get to spend some more time watching all you guys and everyone that's up to, because I know there's not just yourself, Bunker. There's a couple of other guys as well who've painted and followed. But yeah, it's no worries at all. I want to get to watch you and see what you're doing, and watch a master at work. You know what? I think from what you can see for the rest of the model, I might not bother with anything else because there's so difficult to see anything else for these splits that I might just stick those prominent ones at top. Can't really see anymore. If you can't see it, you can't paint it, and if you can't see it, nobody knows. There we go. I'll call that done for that little bit. That was a lot easier than I was expecting. Gentle chiding between friends is awesome. It's when that just turns to pure meanness. That's when it's when it all goes a bit wrong. But we all poking fun. It's all good. That was the wife. And I was quite a way back, but they work really well. You don't confuse these with your drinking mugs, your coffee or your tea, and they work quite well. They're hard to knock over, low centre of gravity. I've got a whole stack of them down on the floor somewhere for when eventually I break one of them. Yeah, I use the same thing. I've got probably about 10 sitting around on various shelves, and they're really handy things. Right, there we go. It's cleaned up. Not happy how that brush is looking. I might worry about that later. Right, where are we now? Final stage of the skin now. I'm going to dry brush some pallid witch flesh, which is going to get a good shake. I'm going to spin this one in the vortex because it does need it. Yeah, I've got a lot of other cups on here that I use for things, so I've got my main paintbrush holder, which was a gift from a kid one Christmas, and I don't want to spoil it by drinking from it and having to wash it all the time and slowly work off that wonderful face on there, so I just use it to keep all my important paintbrushes off to one side. Hopefully we'll be able to oh, that's making a mess, isn't it? Oh, whatever. So has anyone actually been using Cheers on the Hive? Enjoy the night. I was going to say, is anyone using a texture palette instead of just paper towels for dry brushing? I've seen a few bits and pieces on the internet, people really raving about it, but I've never had any problems with kind of chalky dry paint, so I don't know whether either I'm doing something wrong with my dry brushing or I'm really missing a trick. I like dry brushing because it's lazy. If you're careful with them and build up layers, not just kind of one dry brush, but kind of gradual dry brushing up, you can get a really nice subtle effect, I find, of kind of blending without the need for a dry palette, for a wet palette, and the associated skill with doing that. So for me it's perfect because it matches my skill level completely, but I'm also quite happy with the kind of results I get from it as well. I like for the style I get, people who kind of do the wet palettes, and I'm absolutely in awe about the results they get from that. But for me this works really well. It feels like a nice kind of compromise really of building up those transitions and the blending between the various layers and softening the individual colours and blending them together. So for me, for my approach, for kind of my skill level, for me, for speed, dry brushing is kind of an invaluable tool. I use it a lot. In fact, pretty much every part of this model by the time I finished will have had some dry brushing on it one way or another, and I mean that pretty much every single bit, the teeth, the claws, the body, the carapace, all of it. But everyone develops a bit of a style. I have to admit, I use my thumb as well quite a bit sometimes, just because it's probably a dodgy old man thumb and it's a bit bridged, that nail, that it's if I'm not quite convinced that I've got it, I'll sometimes just drag it across the thumb just to be sure. Good night, bazookas. I'm going to get to know all you guys, I hope. I think I've recognised a few names already, so I'm looking forward to hanging out with you guys over the next couple of weeks, months, and at the rate I paint, probably decades, as I clear off the shelf of shame. I foolishly looked at the price of some of the nids for the Leviathan resells, and they're ridiculously cheap. You can buy 10 termagants for a tenner. It's like, oh. Yes, I think that painter's thumb, that colour that we've seen all too often. Oh, this is. yeah, for the texture palette that I've seen people trying to sell STL files for them as well. It's like bit of wood, a bit of things stuck to them. You don't need to spend money on those things. I think I said as well at the weekend I'm going to try and dig out some space. Oh well, I've cleared some space, but I'm going to try and set up a light box at the weekend so I can actually start putting some photos up about actual progress, so you can see more than what you can see through my potato camera online, and see where we're getting to with these things. Because I like to post up some of the results when I finally finish these things. It seems a little bit pointless to go through all of this without actually getting there to do it. So that's my weekend chore for myself. Dig out all that light box and go there. Yeah, us old timers, we know what's alright. We don't need to follow the fads. Keep doing what's worked for us for years. Let's see if I can get under the model now. Just I'm quite nearly done with this final dry brush. It seems to have come along quite nicely now, so I just need to get all the areas under the bottom of the claws and the mandible areas, and I think I might be done on this. Right. It's nearly done. A little bit more just around the head. It's one of these things where I've spent all evening doing things and you can hardly tell the difference, and it's a bit annoying sometimes. However, I know it's done. As you look at it close up in person, it's quite clear that it's done as well. There we go. I'm happy with that. It's definitely softened off the wash from last night quite considerably. It was a bit harsh when I completed it, but we're looking alright there at the moment. Brush cleaning time. And I think what I do next. It's a tricky time of the night because, right, 20 to 12, I have a piece of work I need to witness, is the best way to describe it, at 4 AM in the morning, so that's 4 hours and 18 minutes away. So, do I stay up and continue working away? Do I get a sneaky 3-hour kip to be kind of awake when that happens. Oh, decisions. The lucky thing is, after that 4 to 8 o'clock in the morning session, I've only got another couple of bits of work to do, then my day will be done. So, yeah. Thanks, Jace. You have a good night too. I will hopefully see you around on one of the various streams. I will spend a bit of time over the next week. I'll go and join everyone and see what everyone else is up to. Give my poor eyes a break. Just make sure all that pigment's out of the dry brush. Still got a bit to go there. Right, what should I do next? What do I trust myself to do next? Just get this brush clean first. Still not getting that's clean. Right, one last bit. Good night, dear.
Good night.
See you in a bit. I won't wake you up at 4.
Why?
You're not in the same room.
That's fine. I was just checking why you were telling me this.
My wife has decided that being in the same room when my alarm goes off at 4 in the morning, or whatever way I decide to do, is not a great idea. Right. What's next? We've got all skin stuff done. So the last things we need to do on this now, it's not far from finished. We've got the face to do. We've got the mouth, the teeth, the eyes, the tongue, got the various claws, and then the basing. I'm quite looking forward to the basing. I think I'm going to call it there. I'm going to get a couple of hours kip, and I'll be back tomorrow with a vengeance. And hey, maybe tomorrow we'll finish off the main body of this fella and get him done, and then move on to finishing the base as well. So I'm going to call it tonight. So sorry, Zomb. It's no need to shout now. Sorry for that. It's a bit late, but I'm planning on having several hours tomorrow to go through. I want to finish this fella, and then I want to start something else more exciting. So thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for joining me this evening. I've thoroughly enjoyed meeting you guys. A couple for the second time, and I promise I will be more polite and I will visit back in kind over the next few days. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Be good to one another. Be good. Be safe. Take care. Good night, everyone.